We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Aleph and Mesechet Kesubos. This is Kesubos Daf 90a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing what happens if a woman, she produces a get and a ksuba, and she also produces evidence that her husband died, and she's claiming she wants to collect two ksubas because she's saying she got divorced, then she remarried the same husband, so there are really two ksubas over here that she wants to collect. And so the Gemara says, Im get kodem l'ksuba. If the get that she produces is dated before the ksuba, so then gova shtei ksubas. Then she could actually collect two ksubos. But ksuba kodem is leget. But if the ksuba is dated earlier than the get, aina gova l'ksuba achas, then she can only collect one ksuba. Sham megarish is ishto, because the general rule is, and this we mentioned earlier, if somebody divorces his wife v'hechazira and then he remarries her, al menas ksuba harishona hechzira. The assumption is that he's marrying her on the same conditions of the first ksuba, meaning he's just reinstituting the first ksuba, and there really is only one ksuba. Rashi over here says, "Im get kodem l'ksuba." If the date on the get is before the ksuba, harei kasav l'ksuba shein is kishech zira. So that shows that he wrote a second ksuba when he remarried her. That's why in that case she gets two ksubas. Otherwise, she only gets one. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Katan Shehisio Aviv. Let's say you have a situation of a minor who's married off by his father. So in such a situation, the marriage is only going to be considered, it's not going to be considered a doraisa marriage until he reaches adulthood. And then when he reaches adulthood, at that point, if he continues to be with this woman, so then it's going to be a doraisa marriage. So at that point, when he becomes an adult, ksubasa kayemes. So her original ksuba, whatever ksuba was written when he was a katan, that's going to be enacted when he becomes an adult. Shalmanas kain kaima, because we assume that when he continues the marriage as an adult, he's doing it under the conditions of the ksuba that was written when he was a katan. And the Mishnah continues with a similar case. Gershin is gaira ishto imo. Let's say you have a ger. When he was not Jewish, he was married to a woman. They were both not Jewish. And then together they convert. And now they stay as a married couple. So now it's like the marriage is really starting from that point in time. But let's say he wrote for a ksuba when they were not Jewish. So ksubasa kayemes shalmanas kain kaima. Whatever ksuba he wrote for when they were not Jewish, so that's going to apply when they become Jewish. That ksuba will be the one that will be used. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna says, Lo shanu elo monim wasayim. This halach in the Mishnah is only true by the base amount of the ksuba, meaning either the 100 or the 200, depending if the woman is a basula or an almana. Those are tanai bezdin, and so therefore that continues when he becomes an adult or when the person converts. That's the ksuba we're talking about in the Mishnah. Avol tosefes einla, but she's not going to get the tosefes. If there was additional monies that he wrote into the ksuba when he was a minor or when he was not Jewish, that's not going to continue when he becomes an adult or when the person becomes Jewish. For Rav Yehuda Amar, but Rav Yehuda says, Afilu tosefes yeshla. No, she even gets the tosefes. It means to say, the Mishnah means to say, that she gets whatever ksuba was written when the person was a minor or was not Jewish. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question. Chidshu, no tell us masha chidshu. The Tosefta says that let's say when he becomes an adult or he converts, he adds something into the ksuba, so then she gets to take whatever is added. And so therefore the Gemara says, chidshu in lo chidshu lo. So that's only true if something was added in there. Otherwise he doesn't get any tosefes. It's just, she doesn't get any tosefets. It's just the base amount. So the Gemara says, no, Ema, what it means to say is, Af masha chidshu, even what was added, she's going to collect. But really, according to Rav Yehuda, she would collect the entire ksuba and even the tosefes. But the Gemara says, 1 second, but that's not taught. It's not taught that way. It says chidshu in another brisa. It says chidshu no telas masha chidshu. It says if there was something added that was new, she takes whatever was added. Lo chidshu, but if nothing was added, it says clearly here, besula gova masayim v'almana mana. It says that a besula is going to get 200 and almana is going to get 100, meaning only the base amount. And so the Gemara says, to Yufta Rav Yehuda, this is a refutation of Rav Yehuda. And the Gemara concludes and explains, Rav Yehuda masnisan atise. Rav Yehuda, the reason why he made a mistake is because the Mishnah, the phrasing of the Mishnah misled him. Hu savar ksubasa kayemes akula milsakai. He thought that when the Mishnah says ksubasa kayemes, that's the language over here of the Mishnah, ksubasa kayemes, he thought that's going on the entire ksuba, whatever is written in the ksuba. Velohi, but that's not the case. Ikar ksuba kai, it's only going on the main part of the ksuba, the base amount, the 100 or the 200. It is not going in the Tosefes. Hadron Allah Hakosev Leishto. We will return to you Parak Hakosev Leishto. That is the end of the 9th Parak of Mesechet Kesubos. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the 10th Parak of Mesechet Kesubos. And the Parak begins with the Mishnah, Misha Yanasoi Shtei Nashim. Let's say a person is married to 2 women, he has 2 wives, V'meis, and he dies, so Harishona Kodemis Lishniya. So if there's a limited amount of property, property to collect the ksuba from, so the first wife is going to take precedence over the second wife. She collects first, and then the second wife can take whatever remains. And similarly, the Yarshim, the inheritors of the first wife, they take precedence over the Yarshim, over the inheritors of the second wife. Again, if there's a limited amount of property, the ones from the first wife are going to come first. And the Mishnah continues, Nasa es harishona v'meisa. Now let's say he marries the first wife and then she dies before him. Now if she dies first, she's not going to collect the ksuba. However, generally there is a stipulation in the ksuba referred to as ksubas benin dichrin, and we say, let's say for example, a person were to have two wives and they both died before him. So on a doraisa level, you would split all of his property evenly among all of the sons. Doesn't matter who their mother was, doesn't matter which wife. But there's a halacha ksubas benin dichrin which says that if the ksuba, let's say, to the first wife is larger than the ksuba to the second wife, or vice versa, so those sons, the sons of the ones with the larger ksuba, they're going to get the amount in that ksuba, and actually both sets of sons, you're always going to get the amount in the ksuba. That's ksubas benin dichrin, the ksuba that goes to the male sons, and then whatever is remaining, that gets split up. And we should also note that halacha of ksubas benin dichrin, we'll talk about this as we go on, that halacha only applies assuming there's going to be something, at least a dinar's worth of property that is left over after they take the ksubas. That has to be left over to divide evenly. If there's no Yerusha to divide evenly, then there's no halacha of ksubas benin dichrin, and then we say that everything, whatever remains, is going to be divided evenly. So in any case, the Mishnah over here is saying, let's say he marries this first wife and she dies before him, and then nasa shniya v'meishu, then he marries a second wife and he dies. So in that situation, when he dies and that wife is still alive, so she's supposed to collect the ksuba from him, that second wife, she's kind of like a balas chov, that she's like a creditor coming to collect what is owed to her. Whereas the children of the first wife, since the first wife died before him, so she was never a creditor to collect the ksuba, that's just basically an inheritance of theirs. So in such a situation, if he dies, so now shniya v'yarsheha, so that second wife and those who inherit her, kodmin li'yarsheha rishona, they're actually going to be before the inheritors of the first wife, because they are considered to be, in this situation, they're considered to be creditors, and they come before the Yarshim. And Rashi over here explains, Shniya v'Yarsheha Kodmin, the second wife and her Yarshim come before. Why? Shehi balas chov, again, like we said, she's a balas chov, she's a creditor. Aval Rishonim boin liyarish asavian, but according to the Mishnah, the first ones, they're really taking the ksubas benin dichrin as a form of Yerusha, inheritance. Ta'inun yirsun tanan, this is a discussion, but the way our Mishnah understands, what is going to be the language of the ksubas benin dichrin, inun yirsun, they're considered Yarshim, they're considered inheritors of that ksuba. Lafikach parnas achov tchila v'hashar Yerusha. Therefore, the way to do it, the procedure is, first you have to pay off your debts, that's the second wife, that's the ksuba to her, and then you can take care of the Yerusha, which is the ksubas benin dichrin. And so the Gemara now says, Midakatani harishona kodemis lishniya. From the fact that it says over here in the Mishnah, it says the Rishona, she takes precedence over the Shniya, meaning to say in the situation where a person has two wives and he dies, it talks about precedence. Velokatani harishona yeshlav hashniya einla. It doesn't say in the Mishnah that the first one she receives and the second does not. So what does that imply? The Gemara understands Michlal, that implies the kod mashniya v'taf. So let's say the second one would be quick, and she would actually grab the property for herself. She would take her ksuba for herself. Lo mafkinan mina. We wouldn't take it away from her. If she's able to quickly take what is owed to her in the ksuba, the first one can't take it away. And the Gemara says, Shema mina. Can we see from this, do we see from our Mishnah, that Baal Chov Ma'ucher Shekadam V'Gava, let's say you have in general creditors, so the later creditor, if he goes ahead and he grabs it, even though he's really, it's not his turn in line, Masha Gava Gava, it seems like our Mishnah is saying that what he collects is considered collected. Do we see that from our Mishnah? And the Gemara says, not necessarily, really, I could say to you, Mashagava lo gov, it's not true. When it comes to creditors, really, if the second creditor comes and tries to take first, it's not going to be considered a good collection. It will have to go to the first one. Umay kodemes legamri katani. And what does it mean that the first wife is kodemes to the second wife? She's before the second wife. It means she's totally kodemes. And if the second wife tries to take, if she takes quickly, she will not be allowed to keep it. Kidetanan, like we learned in the Mishnah, ben kodem labas. For example, and by inheritance, it talks about the fact fact that a son comes before a daughter, but it doesn't just mean comes before a daughter. It means the son inherits, and the daughter does not inherit. That's the same thing over here. Ika de Amri, some have a different version of the above discussion as follows. Midalo katani imkadma shniya v'tafsa. From the fact that it doesn't say that if the second one comes, it doesn't say that if she comes and grabs, ein motziin miyado, that we don't take it away from her. Michlal, so it implies the other way, di kadma shniya v'tafsa, that if the second one comes along and tries to grab, mafkinan mina, we actually would take it away. Shma mina, if you're going to understand the Mishnah that way, so we see from this Mishnah, balchov mu'ocher shekadam v'gava, that if a later balchov comes and grabs, mashagava lo gava, you can do the exact opposite inference. Whatever he's trying to grab is not going to be considered collected. And again, the Gemara says not necessarily. Really, I could say to you, Masha Gava Gava, a second creditor, if he tries to collect first, if he collects, then it's considered successful, he keeps it. But Aidi Detana Shniya V'Yorsha Kodman Liyorshe Harishona. But since we're going to say later in the Mishnah, at the end of the Mishnah, the language is Shniya V'Yorsha are Kodman. So over there, we're going to use that language anyway. So therefore, we use the same language in the first part of the Mishnah. And Rashi over here explains Aidi Deboy Lemisni Seifa. Since at the end of the Mishnah, we need to say Shniya V'Yorsha Lishna de Kodman. There, when we're talking about the fact that the second wife, at the end of the Mishnah, the second wife was a creditor, and the Yarshim of the first wife, they were really considered inheritors by the Ksubas ben Indichron. So there we have to use a language of Kodman. But there we can't say Im Kidmu v'Tafsu ein motziin miyadam, that if they go ahead and take first, we don't take it away from them. Ta'avadai motziin, because over there we certainly will take it away. Im Tafsu v'Echziku bekarka, if the inheritors of the first wife try to take first, and again they're inheritors, they're not creditors, we would take it away. Because there you have a situation where the property, there's a lien on the property to the person who is the creditor. So over there you have to use the language of Kodman, and you can't use this language of Im Kidmu v'Tafsu ein motziin miyadam. So therefore we don't use that language in the first part of the Mishnah, but it could very well be that that is the case. Then in the first part of the Mishnah, Im Kidma shniya v'Tafsa, maybe it is true, ein motziin miyada, and therefore it is no proof. You can't make an inference from the Mishnah. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Amud Beis.